Okay, so we're finally going to get to lists. If you recall, we've done kind of everything except the most obvious structure that we've got, most flexible structure that we've got in Python, which is the list structure. We started out with functions and operators and then made sure we had a handle on the different programming structures such as if-else and logical expressions, using logical expression for testing. Um, and so I think now it's time to start thinking about lists and then incorporating lists into other programming structures such as for loops, while loops, and so forth. Okay, so what is a list? It's just a sequence. It's like a string. However, list elements can be of any type. String elements are just characters, right? Lists are mutable, whereas strings are immutable. Well, we're going to see that not in this set of notes, but in the next one, I think. Yeah. Um, elements within a list can be different types. So we could have different dimensions, different, character string versus numerical measures. We can nest lists, which is really handy. Think in this way, it's much like a list in R, right? Um, some methods are available for strings and some are available for lists, but they tend to differ a lot of the time. So be careful. We'll see a little bit of that. Okay, so here's a few functions for lists. The length of a list you get by len, min and max, easy. The sum, okay, that works on strings as well, except obviously sum is not relevant. Min max is relevant with regard to the character coding. Okay, so here's an example. A list, it has 3 elements, 1, 2, 3. 3 is not the number of characters in each element. That's arbitrary right here, arbitrarily the same. We could replace the first element. So notice how we extract the first element and replace it with y, x, sorry, I can't read, w, x, y, and z. Then we can print the length of the list. So what will be the length? Make a prediction. I think this one's pretty easy. We can talk about it in class. But we're simply replacing, right? So it's still going to be 3. If you don't understand it, let's talk about it. Okay, so there's other list methods also that are really useful besides just doing the length or the min, the max, the sum. It can be things like we can use dir, which we've seen at the very beginning of our notes, just to get a directory of all the list methods available within Python. We can also get help on a particular method. You just do help list dot whatever the method is that you need help on. So for example, if you needed help with append, you do help list dot append. And what append is it adds an element to the end of the list, and you could look at the help file and figure that out. So append, you would just put an element in there. We're going to show that in just a moment. Extend, on the other hand, you have another list where you can extend one list with another list. So that kind of takes it up a notch, not just adding an element like here, but a full list. Insert, we have to index it and then add in the element. So you can insert an element at a particular index of a list. So after the 3rd element, for example. And it pushes the later elements forward, meaning into later slots. Pop, it removes and returns the element at the end of L. So if you don't put anything in here, it's going to assume the end. That's default. But typically, I like to specify that index so we know where we're removing and returning that element. So if you put in a 1, it's going to be after the first. If you put in a 2, it'll be after the second. If you put in a 0, it'll be the first. Remove element, it'll remove that first occurrence of the element. Be careful because it only removes the first. So we'd have to maybe think a little deeper to remove every occurrence of a particular element type. Maybe that needs to be something I assign to you. And then sorting. Sorting's pretty clear. So let's think through some of this. Okay, I have a list, very simple, 2, 4, 6, 8. Then I'm going to use the remove function. So notice again, my object, the function, what I'm removing, remember remove removes the first element of that occurrence, or the first occurrence of that element. I said that backwards. And then we have the pop, which if we put in, that's an index for pop, if you recall. So it's going to remove that and return it as a result of the function. So run this through in your head, make a prediction. Let's do this in class. I want us to think through. I can kind of lay it out for you so you know this first one, and then you're on your own with the one after this, okay? So here we have 2, 4, 6, 8, we remove 4, okay? So what do you get when you remove 4? Well, that should be clear. Then what would be the second element after we've removed 4? So what's left? Is it 6, 8, 2, 6, 2, 8? Think about it, bring it to class. I kind of ran through it enough. I think you can figure that one out. Then notice here, we just flip those two. Do we get the same result or different? Remember, this has to do with the index, not the element 2. So I'll give you a clue. We'll get a different result here. Bring it to class. Okay, so what's great about lists is you can loop through them. The syntax for looping through all elements of a list is just like looping through a string. So that's why you start with a string first. I think that makes a lot of sense to do that. That's actually in that online text, how they do it, and I really like that approach. So the loop variable is going to be the name element here, and we do something in that for loop using that element to help us index something. Okay, an element's going to step through every single part, every single location of your list and accomplish some sort of task. So let's think about writing a function here that takes a list of strings and prints out the length in the list. So for example, if I have this list, I have 3 strings. The output should be 3, 1, and 0, because we've got 3 elements here, 1 element here, 0 characters here. So this is going to be part of the practice for class to think through this problem. But go ahead and sketch out ideas before you get to class. Okay, another string example here. Word count. So here's a sample string with a bunch of white space intentionally inputted. Write a function that takes a string and returns the number of words in that string. The words may be separated by 1 space or multiple spaces. The string is guaranteed to not start or end with a space. Do not use split. Okay, so split is a function within Python, but I want you to just write a for loop to accomplish this task. Sketch out ideas before you come to class, and we're going to work on this in class. Okay, so that's enough. We're at 9 minutes now. Take a moment at the end of these notes just to sketch out ideas. Maybe sketch out at least the for loop and how you might step through the elements of this, thinking of it as a list, okay? Or thinking of the output here as a list.